But hello, welcome to our More Than Salary webinar. I'm Danielle Thompson, and I work on events here at the College of Social Work. We are excited to have you join us virtually or as you view the recorded discussion. Before we get started with today's presentation, on behalf of the College of Social Work, I recognize the contributions of our American Indian community members by acknowledging that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between states, tribes, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. So today I am excited to be sharing some tips and best practices when it comes to considering job offers. Before my role here at the College of Social Work, I spent 15 years in human resources. I've made lots of job offers to applicants, and I'm hopeful that this presentation will help you with some ideas of what you should take into account when an organization is offering you a position. If you're interested in tips when it comes to interviewing, I would really encourage you to view our interviewing panel webinar recording that's on our website. I'm going to put that link in the chat. This panel was made up of experts from a variety of agencies, and they had some really incredible advice, and I think it's worth watching the recording if you're interested in improving your interviewing skills. So, as we go along, please go ahead and use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit any questions you might have, and I'll address those as we go along. Sometimes it's easier to wait, but I think as the topics change, it's probably good to just go ahead and address those as they go along. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything looks like it's good. Let me know if you can't see the screen or if there's any issues at all. But let's go ahead and get started. So as you are considering job offers from a variety of organizations, there are some things that you're going to want to look for, and also things that you're going to want to be aware of when you're considering those job offers. So we're going to talk about that today. I always have a disclaimer. I am not an attorney. However, maybe my parents wish I was one. So I'm not able to give you specific advice as far as employment law. However, I would say if you do have specific questions, one good resource is the Human Resources Department of the agency that you are considering the offer for. They usually have some good tips and also a lot of detailed knowledge about the different benefits and how things work. And so that's a good place to start. And obviously, if things get really dicey, there are employment attorneys that can help with that. But the human resources representative or department is usually a good place to start, and they often have a little bit more information or knowledge than a hiring manager might have about benefits and different things like that. So when it comes to a job offer, the biggest thing and the most important thing I can tell you is to get it in writing. A lot of managers may have a lot of things to say to you in an interview, but unfortunately, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen, is kind of how we viewed it in human resources. There's not a lot of backup for that. So if you're in an interview and the hiring manager says that you are the best person they've ever seen and they want to offer you $1 billion, make sure you get that in writing. And the easiest way to say that is just simply to say, hey, could you please email me that information? Because I think it's very important not to respond to that in the heat of the moment. And you don't need a big legalese document of everything they say, but as long as they can send you something in writing, that's going to be very helpful and obviously going to go a long way in making sure you get what you are offered and promised in your communications. Also, I would encourage when you accept a position or if you have any questions about a position to email those in writing to the manager or the HR department, whoever you're communicating with. It's really important, again, that you have those items as backup so that you have, the documentation that you need for that. Expect additional documents. So a lot of times, organizations will have a bunch of different things that they're going to send you with the job offer. And it's important to talk about what those are. A non-compete agreement basically says, you're not going to go work for a competitor for a certain amount of time, or you're not even going to talk about the business practices of the organization you're currently with. Right now, there is legislation to ban non-compete agreements. It has not been approved yet. And basically what that would mean is that there's no non-compete agreements going forward, and any that have come in the back or come previously would be nullified. So non-compete agreements are a little bit of a hot button issue right now. And so you may or may not see one of those. Non-disclosure agreements or privacy agreements, things that talk about what you can talk about, are going to be something that you'll see. And again, with the role of a social worker, there's obviously going to be additional rights as far as privacy for people that you're talking with. But just know that those are two kind of important documents that you may see come through with your job offer. You can certainly ask the hiring manager if they're willing to consider a job offer without those documents. I would just be prepared to know that most organizations, if they have taken the time to draft them, the offer of employment is usually contingent on you signing those. So it may be that if you aren't willing to sign them, that offer for a job is not going to be viable. So just kind of understand that there may be some additional documents that you're going to see. To the rate of pay. So I am talking, and again, if people kind of know all this already, I apologize if I'm going over things that have already been gone over, but I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as understanding of some key terms. So one thing that you will see is your rate of pay, and there are a couple different rates of pay. We have exempt or salaried rates of pay, and then you'll also see non-exempt or hourly rates of pay. So exempt pay is basically you are paid a set amount no matter how much work you do. So it's usually annual. It's usually an annual amount. And whether or not you work all those hours or you work more than those hours, you're going to get the same amount in your paycheck every time you're paid. It's a set amount. Non-exempt or hourly, you are paid an hourly rate, and you're going to be usually logging your hours. You're going to be eligible for overtime or comp time, compensatory time. So you will have a different setup there, and your checks, depending on how many days are in a pay period, might be different. So make sure that you understand how much that is going to be. Sometimes being salaried is more money. Sometimes, given overtime and how many hours you're working, it's actually beneficial to be hourly. So just make sure you understand what the rate of pay looks like and how much that is going to be. And then also the pay frequency matters. Sometimes in job offers, employers will write, we're going to give you $1,000 a week. You're going to want to understand what that means versus, somebody who says, oh, we're going to give you $60,000 a year. You want to make sure you understand exactly what you're going to be getting paid. And then finally, you're going to want to check that the rate of pay, the job title, and the job duties match the job posting and discussions you've had. If you get a job offer that looks completely different than what you understand the job to be, ask a lot of questions about that. This can happen, I think, a lot of time in managerial roles. a manager might tell you during an interview that you're going to be supervising a lot of people, that you have this, big career progression, but then when it comes to the job offer or what's in the job posting, those things aren't there. And so I think it's very important to make sure that everything matches and that it is to your understanding. Obviously, there's things that come up in jobs that are, new or different, job duties change over time. But if the fundamental job duties listed don't match what you think they should be or what your understanding was, I think it's important to let that person you're knowing or person that you're working with know, hey, this doesn't seem to match. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that would be? And again, please do it in writing so that you have all of that information. So I'm going to quickly look just before I move on to this. I don't think we have any questions yet, so that's fine. Again, just please let me know if you have any questions as we go along. So, okay. So as you get your job offer, there are some things that you are going to want to look for, things that you're going to want to understand what they mean. And I don't want you to feel like you have to be an HR professional by the end of this, but I do think it's important that you understand some of the key terms that will come up in a job offer. The first is at will. Utah is what's known as a right to work state or an at will state. And that means that an employer or an employee can terminate their employment for any reason at any time, except for an illegal reason. So I can't be terminated simply because I'm a woman. Obviously, that's legal. But if an employer is saying you're late all the time and that's not going to fly, I'm going to let you go, they have the right to do that. As an employee, you also have that right. If something's not working out and, while professionally we may say offer 2 weeks notice, 4 weeks notice, under the law, there is no requirement for that. Now, I do have a caveat with this. If you have anything in your offer or your employment that is slightly different, maybe an employer is paying for your college or a program, they may say you need to work here for so long or else you have to pay us back that amount you spent. So just kind of be aware if there are any special circumstances that you might have those obligations. But as far as actually ending employment, it can be done at any time. So that is an important thing to understand. Other states have different rules and regulations. A lot of states have labor unions that they work with, and those labor unions have very strict guidelines about when an employee can be released or let go. So in Utah, we do have a very broad employment law as far as being able to let people go. So you may see the term at will in your offer letter. Another term that you may see is probationary period. A probationary period is a trial period when usually an employee can be more easily released from employment. They're traditionally 6 to 12 months. If you get an offer letter with a probationary period that is longer than that, I would probably push back on that a little, make sure that that's company policy, that can be long because, a probationary period should end. At some point, you are considered a regular employee and that should end. So a lot of times, for example, at the University of Utah, if you're an employee here, probationary period is 6 months. Now, while we're an at-will state, the university has pretty stringent regulations about releasing people. And during the probationary period, those are not as, I shouldn't say not as well followed, but the probationary period allows the employer to more easily release people. You may have something like that in an agency that you're looking at. They may have very strict internal rules about letting people go, but it might be a little easier when you're in your probationary period. So it's important to understand how long that will be and what that means for you as an employee and your employment. Rehire checks. So a lot of times job offers are contingent on rehire checks. So if you do not pass one of these checks, the employer might say, we're not going to move forward with your employment. So let's talk a little bit about some of the most common pre-hire checks. Background checks are usually pretty standard, especially for larger organizations. Education checks, reference checks, and drug testing. The biggest thing I can tell you with background and drug testing is if there is something that you anticipate an employer is going to find, it is best to talk about it ahead of time. When they send you either the offer letter or when you are signing there's usually an acknowledgement and an authorization to do those. I would talk to that hiring manager about, hey, when you run this, this is what you're going to find. And here's the circumstances of that. That usually gives employers a lot more information to make a decision based on, which is very helpful. Additionally, different employers may have different levels of what is allowed as far as, the speeding ticket. Obviously, that's not going to be an issue. Is it theft? Is it, what kinds of things is it going to be, and does it impact the job duties? So different employers may have different bars that they set. And then also with drug testing, if you do have a medical marijuana card, you're going to want to let your employer know that. A lot of times the drug testing companies will ask that, and then they won't consider that in the results. But again, if there's something that is probably going to come up, it's always a good idea. I shouldn't say always, it's most often a good idea to talk to the employer about that ahead of time. I'd also like to make just a quick plug on reference checks, especially as you're graduating, maybe your work history is a little shorter, and you may be tempted to use personal references, either a family friend or something like that. I would really encourage you to look for people who are professional references, whether that's through your schooling or any other jobs you've had. After checking a lot of references, I could tell you when I call someone and they say, oh, yeah, we've been friends forever. I'm not really inclined to put a lot of weight into their recommendation because you're friends. And of course, they're going to say wonderful, glowing things about you. So really think about who you're going to be providing as a reference, and please let them know that you are providing them as a reference. We've seen people get very caught off guard and kind of even say, I've had somebody say to me before, I'm not even sure why they would put me down as a reference. So make sure that they are aware they are a reference. And if you are really interested in a specific job, let the reference know about it. Say, hey, here's the job I'm applying for or interviewing for, and I'm really excited about it. Here's some of the things that I would be doing in that job. And then they can speak a little bit better about how you would be a good fit for that job. Less common, but still sometimes get checked, credit check and a social media check. So credit checks usually are for if you have a financial component to your job, if you're handling money or managing large budgets. Sometimes a company will do a credit check to ferret out if they think you'll do an okay job at that. They do have to have you authorize that. That's not one that they can just do without your knowledge. Social media check. This can be very rigorous, or it can be just somebody hopping on TikTok or Instagram and putting in your name. We all do it to each other, and companies do it to the people they're going to hire. They will search and see if there's anything on there. I am not at all advocating that you change who you are or remove content or anything like that, but I am recommending that you be aware of what is on your social media. And if you need to put some restrictions on who can view things, go ahead and do that. It's always just a good idea that you be aware of what's out there and what an employer or a potential employer can view. Eligible to work in the United States. So you will be required to present documentation showing you can work in the United States. And there's a whole list of lovely documents that you can provide. One thing just to be aware of, as HR individuals, we're basically told, we can't tell you what to provide. So we've had a lot of employees say, "Hey, I don't know. Here's the list. What of these things can I bring in?" As an employer, we're not supposed to tell you what you're supposed to bring in, which can make it kind of challenging. So there's a whole list of things. And all I will say about that is if you know that you have documents that are not with you, for example, you have a passport and your mom has it back in New York, go ahead and have her send that to you. You'll need to have those things. Employers are not supposed to take scans or copies of documents. We are supposed to see the original documents. So an employer won't be able to accept a scanned copy. So if you need to gather those things, it's a good time to do it ahead of time. Make sure you have everything. You will need to show that within 3 days of your start date, or else the employer may have to, put you on a leave or something until you can actually get those documents. And then benefits waiting period. This is another important one. The benefits waiting period is the time between your hire date and when your benefits actually start. For some organizations, it's the same day. You get benefits the day you start. For others, there's a 30-day waiting. There might be a 60-day. If it's more than that, I would be concerned. I don't think there's a big reason to have those, although I suppose an organization might have something special that they do. But I would say, if it's more than 60 days, that seems a little bit lengthy. A lot of employers will have those start the day that you start, or at least with the pay period. But that's what a benefits waiting period is, just to make sure you understand when your coverage actually begins. So I'm going to check really quick. I have a question here. For your references, is it better to have someone with a fancy title, supervisors or directors, who might know your work less well, or someone with a less fancy title, coworker, who would speak more highly? If you can put both, that's great. And as you put your references together, you can even kind of address that. You can put, the person's information, and then maybe a bullet point under it of, a supervisor during tenure at blah blah organization, or worked on joint project together at this. So that can help sometimes for employers who are doing reference checks to understand what kinds of questions should I be asking this person. What might they be able to speak to? So I think it's better to have both. And also, I don't think it's bad. I know it's usually 3 references. If you want to offer a couple more, that's great too. I would not have like a whole spreadsheet of references, but if you have, 3 to 6 is great. And sometimes we can't always get a hold of the references right away. So I would put both on there, and even kind of indicate what they are able to speak to when it comes to your background. Good question. Okay. So now we are going to get into some of the really fun stuff. These are the benefits questions that we get, and what you should look for as far as benefits. I do not, again, expect anybody to come out of this presentation with a detailed view or opinion of what benefits are and what they should be looking for. I just want to give you an overall idea of some of the things that you can look at when you're considering job offers that might make a difference for you. And I am also going to give the caveat of there are different things that are important to different people. If you are an individual who does not have a lot of health problems, you don't go to the doctor very often, you are very active, your health or benefits package may be looking different to you than someone who has a chronic illness, or who really needs, maybe has a child with an illness. That coverage is really important. So as you consider your job offers, I think it's important to think about what matters to you and to think about it in terms of your total compensation. Total compensation is everything. It includes your salary, it includes your benefits like health coverage and retirement, it includes any perks, signing bonuses. Total compensation is everything all put together. So it's important to think about where you are in your life and what kinds of things are important to you to have covered. So let's talk a little bit about when we talk about benefits, most people think about health coverage. And that is obviously a very important one. But you'll also have some options depending on the employer about dental, vision, and then mental and behavioral health. Mental and behavioral health, I'm going to date myself here. When I started my first job in about 20 years ago, there was no mental or behavioral health benefit. It was strictly your health coverage. And as I've gone through my career and seen different offerings, it is now more and more expected. And so again, just keep in mind the different things that might be important to you as far as what that coverage might look like. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is just some key terms. These are, again, going to be things that maybe aren't in the job offer, but are something that you can either find on the employer's website or talk to the HR representative about. And those are things that matter, especially if you use health coverage a lot. So we have all these key terms, right? And I'm going to put at the end of the session in the chat, I will put this very handy dandy slide of all the different terms and what they mean, and hopefully that can help. Again, I don't want you to be an expert, but I do want you to think a little bit about what is important to you in your health. So for example, the first key term we have is a deductible. What a deductible is basically how much you have to pay before your health coverage kicks in. Some people have a very high deductible. It's $6,000. It might be that their insurance doesn't kick in until they have spent a large amount of money. Those are usually people who don't use a lot of health insurance. They don't go to the doctor a lot. They have it more for emergencies. And so if you're in that boat, a high deductible plan might be great for you. If you're in the boat where you have a lot of health issues, or you have a family member with a lot of health issues, that might not be a great fit. And you might want something that is a lower deductible that maybe is $200, that you put in your $200 and then the insurance starts covering things. The out-of-pocket maximum can be important. That is how much you will have to spend in a year before the insurance company says, okay, we'll cover everything from here on out. So your out-of-pocket maximum might be $3,000, and basically once you've hit that, then the insurance company will take care of everything else. There's also terms like co-insurance and copay. A co-insurance is basically the percentage that you will have to pay for a given service. So maybe I am going to be staying in the hospital, an inpatient stay, and my insurance will pick up 90%. That means I have to pay 10% up to my maximum. A copay is usually just a set dollar amount, maybe $25 for an office visit, things like that. Oh, the other thing to think about, just backtracking really quickly under health coverage, is also prescription coverage. If you have a specific prescription you are using or that is very important to your well-being, I would make sure that that prescription is going to be covered in the way that you need it to be. So apologize about that. So again, I don't want you guys to feel like I have to remember all this, but I think if health is an issue for you or anyone in your family, it is something to take into account as you're considering a job offer. The other thing that can be a little bit hard to think about too much is the retirement benefit. Sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, it's so far away. I am just trying to get by right now. But retirement is a really important component of your total compensation. So there is this little graphic that I've put right here. I hope you guys can see it, that it's not too small, but it talks a little bit about how starting saving at different ages can affect the amount you'll have at retirement. And the key takeaway is the younger you start, the better off you are. So in this example, all the participants put in $5,000 into an account that has an interest rate of about 8%, which is pretty average, and then a retirement age of 67. And it shows you their starting age and how much that $5,000 will grow over the amount of time they have. And that just gives you a really good idea of, even if you can just put aside $10 a month or $10 a paycheck, that will add up. And the earlier you start, the better. So there's two different types of retirement that employers offer. One is called a defined benefit and one's called a defined contribution. Defined benefit is a pension, basically. You work for a company for so long, they're going to give you a percentage of how much you made while you were working for them in your retirement. These are becoming very uncommon. This is something that used to be very standard and now is really not. You do see it in state and federal government at times, but employers are really going away from this because it can be expensive and it's not very flexible. So the defined contribution is what we're all, it's your 401k, where you can set aside amounts that then can grow, sometimes not grow, just depending on how the market is doing. But one thing to really think about is what the employer match is. If an employer has a match of 10%, that's amazing. You put in so much and the employer's going to match that 10%. So up to 10%, excuse me. Some employers are very generous. I have to applaud the University of Utah. They have a 14% contribution and you don't even have to put anything in. They just do that for you. So understand a little bit about what your employer is willing or able to contribute to these and get the most money you can out of them. Again, using that as your total compensation, looking at where your money's actually coming from. So that's my plug for retirement. I think it can feel a little bit a ways away, but as you start getting to that stage of life where you start thinking about it, it's great to have. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to check my time really quick. Okay, good on time. Let's talk a little bit more about all the other types of things that employers are doing. The market is slowing down a little bit. However, I would make the case not for social workers. The demand for social workers is very high, and agencies, I think, are doing a lot to try and differentiate themselves and give you lots of different benefits and perks for selecting them. So let's talk about other things that might come in with a job offer. Additional compensation. So this might be a signing bonus. This might be a on-call bonus. This might be, you probably aren't going to get a lot of stock options, but it could be stock options. Anything that is more money, anything that brings in some additional income and is fairly regular. Again, a signing bonus is always great, but that's usually a one-time thing. So thinking about, are there any other avenues where you can make a little bit extra money, or are there other ways they're compensating their employees? Paid leave and holidays. This one is also becoming a very big deal. People really want to have the time to rest, to recover, to enjoy time with their families and friends. And so it's important to see what kinds of paid leave that a company is going to offer. One thing I would try to find out if it's important to you, I guess, is whether that leave comes at the beginning or if you have to accrue it. So For example, some employers will say you get 3 weeks at the beginning of the year and they're there, and once they're gone, they're gone. Other employers might say you earn 8 hours a month and you can take it as you earn it. So if you have a big trip planned or something that you know is going to come up, it's always a good idea to discuss that with the manager to find out how that's going to look and if there's a way that you can get some vacation time for that. The other thing to consider is holidays. Do you work holidays? Are you on call? Are you expected to be on a rotation? I had a friend who got the day of Thanksgiving off, but not the day after. What kinds of holidays will there be? I think that's always a nice thing to just kind of know. And will you be expected to work those holidays is another important piece of that. The other thing about paid leave is a lot of employers are starting to offer paid parental leave. So you get, whether you have a birth of a child or an adoption, you get paid time off for that. That used to be you had to hang on to your sick time and use it all for something like that. But a lot of employers are now offering paid leave, and that I think is fantastic. So if you are planning on starting a family or are, that might be a good benefit for you, it's nice to add options they have. Education assistance and professional development. This is an important one as far as career progression. Will the employer offer you any help with tuition? Will they cover a certain amount of travel for conferences? It's one of those things that can feel a little bit awkward to ask about, but I think as far as asking what kinds of opportunities are there for professional development, we'll get at this answer. Where would you like to be and how do they help you get to that place? And as I've mentioned before, just kind of keep in mind, some employers do have a stipulation that if you leave within a certain amount of time of either getting a degree or a certification or something like that, that you have to pay that back. So just kind of be aware of what their stipulations around that are. This is probably one of the most important ones, I think, and that's work-life harmony. We don't call it balance anymore because there is no such thing. There is just a lot going on in our lives. And so it's really important to understand if this employer is a good fit for your life. Do they offer any childcare? Again, this is going to be a bigger organization that might do that, but do they have a childcare benefit? Do they have flexible spending accounts for dependent care? Do they have fitness programs? Is there a gym or are there wellness programs that can help you save on your health insurance premiums? What kinds of things do they reward as far as fitness? They give you, some employers give leave for exercise, things like that. Remote work, that is huge. I cannot believe how much in the last 3 years that remote work has become a necessity for a lot of people. A lot of people in the workplace just don't want to have to go into the office. So if that is something that is important to you, make sure you understand what the organization values and what the organization is willing to do as far as remote work. And I think it's really important to look at the conversations you have as you do this. If an employer says to you, hey, yeah, you can do all your work remotely and you never have to come in, but you have to go through 5 interviews and they all have to be in person. And every time you go in, there's lots of people in the office. They may not be giving you an accurate picture of what their remote work situation is like. So if remote work is important to you, really make sure that that is something that the employer will support. And then schedule flexibility. Is this a 9 to 5? Is this a position that has on call? Is this a position that you can do whenever you have time? And what works for your life? Making sure that all of those things kind of align and are being the best that can be offered is important. Parking and commuting. So is there, if you are having to go into the office, is there any is it downtown Salt Lake where you have to pay $90 a month for a parking pass? Do they offer any commuting benefits? For example, University of Utah employees, we get a Trax pass for free, which is great. So, are there benefits that come with that that will help you get into the office if you need to get into the office? Discounts and deals, this can be one that's a little bit more for larger employers. But if there is anything that is a benefit to you. I remember way back in the day, my husband worked for Disney, and one of the deals was that we could get into the parks for free. So that was a great deal. Different employers are going to have different things, but they may or may not have this, but things like travel, even cell phone or insurance discounts, a lot of employers will have. And then company equipment. Make sure that you know what the employer is going to be providing and what they will expect you to provide, especially if you're going to be working remotely. Are they going to be giving you 2 screens, or is it just the laptop? Are they going to be providing a chair? Those types of things. Are they going to give you any sort of stipend for internet usage? Things like that. Understand what the employer is going to be offering you versus what you're going to have to provide on your own. So those are just some of the other benefits that you can take a look at. So let me just check. Any questions on that? I can't see anything yet. So okay. And really quick. Okay. So we're getting kind of close to the end here. Let's talk about things to consider before you accept a job offer. Please consider your interview experience. If you felt like it was overly difficult or you felt uncomfortable with the individuals you were interviewing with, or if you felt super wonderful about it and you felt welcomed and you felt like you could make a difference, think about those things. There's a reason we feel those things. And if it's not a great fit, then it's not a great fit, and that's okay. But a company tells you a lot about themselves during the interview experience and what they value. If they're not flexible during the interview experience, probably not going to be flexible after. Research the organization, just like they can do a social media check of you, do a social media check of them. What kinds of things are they known for doing, and do you feel comfortable with those things? Are they things that support your values? Have they tried to make things right where they have made mistakes? Go through what you can find online about these, but also understand sometimes a lot of times employers get comments from the extreme ends of their base. They have employees who have just had a phenomenal experience, or maybe who get an incentive to fill out a rating. And then they have employees who are very upset about their experience. So you're going to maybe hit those ends of the spectrum on online reviews for employers. So just kind of take that with a grain of salt and understand that it's probably going to be closer somewhere in the middle as far as what that experience is. Consider the schedule. Is this going to work for your life? And if it's not a perfect fit, are there other things that are going to make up for that? Are there other benefits that you're seeing? And maybe not necessarily salary. Salary is wonderful. And obviously we need a certain level of salary to for housing and for the things that we need. But in a very toxic environment, that may not be enough. So consider the schedule, consider what you're seeing as to whether that will work for you. And that goes along with values. What are your values? What do you value in a company? What do you want that company to do and look for? And are they displaying those things? Think about your competing opportunities. Really think about, if you have multiple job offers, not just which one pays the most, but which one maybe has a better total compensation package and which one supports those values that you are looking for. And then always counter offer. Uh, counter offering is totally expected and welcomed. Well, I don't know if I should say welcomed. Some employers don't want you to ask for more, but they are very familiar with it. I would caution you to please do your research before you counteroffer. Um, a quick Indeed search for the type of position that you are being offered will give you lots of different ranges. If the range for your job at your entry level is, 50 to 70 grand, don't ask for 100. Um, that can feel a little disingenuous. You want that offer to be reasonable. So go ahead and counteroffer. Go ahead and say, hey, this looks great. I was expecting, something around this area. Is that something that you can do? And the worst that can happen is they can say no. But again, it is important, I think, to have that be a reasonable, well-founded offer and not just something that you think I want to make over $100,000. That's what I'm going to ask for. You want to make sure that there's a reason that you're asking for it. So I'm going to, looks like we have a question. I'm going to go ahead and address that. And then I've got some additional resources we can look at. So Jen, it sounds like most of these things are not first interview type questions. Are there any that should or absolutely should not be covered in the first interview? This is a great question. Most of what I'm covering in this presentation is at the job offer stage. You can certainly research different things about the company ahead of time as far as their benefits, especially if they're a bigger company. But a lot of these things are not, I would say things like, is this a remote work opportunity? How do you feel about schedule flexibility? Am I expected to be on call? Those things I think are definitely ones you can ask during the first interview. I would not recommend asking too much about salary or getting really in depth on benefits. I think that can certainly come later and again can come with a job offer. The other thing is once you get a job offer, you're in much better standing to ask for additional things than if you're just at an interview. That job offer means that organization really wants you, and they're probably going to be more willing to do things than if you just ask about it during an interview. And it can feel a little bit of an assumption of getting the role, and that obviously is a cultural thing here as far as politeness goes, but I would steer away from discussions about salary or very specific benefits questions. Sometimes an employer will reach out to you to say, hey, you applied for this job. I see your experience is really high. This is all we're paying for the job. Is that your understanding? So sometimes an employer will reach out to you ahead of time about salary. But when it comes to professional roles, they usually won't. So as far as things that should absolutely be covered in a first interview, again, I would say job duties, working conditions, remote work, culture of the organization. What's a typical day like? A lot of employers will probably tell you there's not a typical day, but kind of what is the culture at the organization? Is it more laid back? Is it very high paced, fast paced because of the types of clients? Those are really good questions for that first interview. And then again, holding back on the more specific salary things, I think until the job offer would be appropriate. Okay. I know we're just about out of time and people probably have to start getting back to class. Are there any other questions I can answer before. To share some resources with you. And like I said, we have a few more minutes. So if you think of anything in the meantime, let me know. But these are a few resources that I would recommend that you visit if you have some time. I know everyone just has lots of time to be looking at HR sites, but there are some good ones. So my favorite one is workplacefairness.org. It is more of a employee based site. So it's talking a lot about, hey, my employer is doing this. Is that okay? Or I've been asked to do that. Is what should I do? It's a little bit more approachable. The Department of Labor certainly has a lot of information, but it can be a little bit hard it's a little bit more technical, I would say. And so it's not quite as friendly as the Workplace Fairness website. And then if you do want to get into any really detailed HR stuff, there is a Society for HR Management. They have a lot of really great tools for how to understand your benefits. What do certain words mean? I'm going to go ahead and in the chat, I think, if I can, I'm going to go ahead and add something to the chat that I think you will find useful. I apologize, just a moment here. Okay. That is a health benefit terms PDF. Again, this might be something for people who are really interested in health coverage and have specific situations. But this comes from SHRM, and they have a lot of other things like that that can be useful. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick double check. We don't have any other questions. I don't see any other questions. So I think we can go ahead and end. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today, as well as for anybody who is watching the recording of the presentation later. We really hope you'll join us again April 20th. That's next Thursday for our in-person career fair at the college. Jen hopefully just put the link in there. It's going to be from 4 to 6, and we have representatives from over 60 agencies who are super excited to meet our students. So that can be found on our page. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your attendance, and good luck in your job search. Bye.